All right, welcome back to the Contrarians. I'm going to start with a brief anecdote. In the late 1990s, I was at a Motörhead concert in Oklahoma City at the Diamond Ballroom. Lemmy announced one song by saying, "This is from Overnight Sensation," which wasn't. Any of you own that album? And several of us, cheered. And he said, "You lying bastards, no one bought that album." He used a less polite term because Lemmy, he had quite the mouth on him. So we're going to talk about a Dark Horse album tonight, Motörhead's 1996 album, Overnight Sensation. Their first album as a three-piece since 1983's Another Perfect Day. And it set the lineup that they would use until Lemmy's death in 2015. Also, it has arguably the worst album cover ever put on a Motörhead album. We may talk about that more as we go through the panels. So, you know how these Dark Horse albums work. We're going to go through and discuss it, talk about high points, low points, and if people feel like it, they can give it marks out of 10, and we will see how the Contrarians feel about this album, although honestly, I'll be shocked if it's anything other than universal love. So we're going to start with Gary. Gary, tell us what you think about Overnight Sensation.
I think it's an awesome album. I don't understand why it's so slept on. I've got some notes, although you rattled off a lot of what I had. Their 13th album, their first with this lineup. Although you don't really think of it that way because this was, after Wurzel left, his involvement on Sacrifice is kind of... a lot of people, he didn't play on all of that album, right? He only played on certain songs, if I'm not wrong. Or was this was the first one where he was credited on?
It's hard to know.
He was credited to those three.
It's hard to know how involved he was with that album. I know that, if you look it up, it says that he was kind of there for the early part of it, but it's so hard to tell what actual impact he had on the whole thing.
But these three guys had been with him since as far back as March or Die, or Bastards was the one from 93. They were all here, but this is just the first one with their three-piece. I think it's overlooked because it's not their best 90s album, but I love that they went in a different direction from Sacrifice on a lot of these songs. This one was Howard Benson producing it. He was on Bastards all the way through Snake by Love, most all their 90s albums. It's a hell of a run. Civil War is an awesome song. I like, too, that the songs are divided up. Half of them are about, like, women, and then the other half are, like, apocalyptic. Songs like Shake the World are really good. Murder Show. Favorite song would probably be the title track, Overnight Sensation. I love the middle bit with the bridge and the bass bit and how the acoustic guitars, which Lemmy actually played. Solid album, although I would say it's not as good as Sacrifice or Bastards, but it's a different direction from those albums, so I appreciate them doing that at this point.
Okay. You want to give it marks out of 10?
I'd go an 8. I think a lot of these songs are really solid. And Eat the Gun sucks. Eat the Gun is an awful song, but that's the only one on here I don't like.
Okay. Well, we might be talking about that one more, too, as we go along. All right. So a positive comment with a few reservations. I'd say that's fair. John, what do you think about this album?
All right. The most consistent 90s Motörhead album, in my opinion. The highs may not be as high as on 1916 or Bastards, but I think this album kicks the whole way through. Civil War, we start out raging. We're on fire here, wicked pace. The riffs kick you right in the ass. Very joyous on here. Very joyous track, very ferocious. Crazy Like a Fox, we slow down a little bit. It's more melodic, but we got some nice riffs on here. They're nice blend between the riffs and the power chords. And then we got a harmonica solo on here to remind you that Motörhead are rock and roll. No matter what different kind of pace they go into in their songs, they slow it down, they speed up. They're a rock and roll band, first and foremost. I don't believe a word. We start with that opening bass line from Lemmy, and then we go into mid-tempo menacing Motörhead. This is very strong. Wonderful vocal on here from Lemmy because he's doing it, he's playing it really straight on the vocals in the verses, and in the chorus, he goes more into that gruff, rough voice of his. It's very cool. You actually have call and response on the choruses here between Lemmy and Phil and the vocals, which is very cool. Eat the Gun. Eat the Gun. Now we go back to Wicked Motörhead again. The lyrics are very primitive, but I think he did that purposely. He made it as primitive as possible to put his point across about what he thinks about guns. Very, very heavy, but perfect for the song are those lyrics. Overnight Sensation, we're starting with that bass up front again. We're a nice swinging riff on here. Great chorus. Very catchy chorus, in my opinion. Very strong. Love Can't Buy You Money. We're going into that killer swinging riff again. Very poignant lyric in the chorus. Very, very strong. Very strong track here. Broken, musically similar to the title track. I think there's a really cool musical bridge on here, but the song is a little long, especially by Motörhead standards. It's good, but it's not great. Them Not Me. Now we're going back to the blistering pace again. And this one kicks ass and takes names. Very good. Murder Show, we got that nice grooving riff on that one. Very driving track on here. Very cool. Shake the World. Now we're getting heavy, as particularly when Mickey D's double bass kicks in on those verses, on those choruses rather. Very, very strong. Then Listen to Your Heart. After we go through all these heavy tracks, we get a sing-along with acoustic guitars blended with the electrics. And this is pretty cool. It's sang with a lot of joy and a lot of glory. Very strong chorus on here. Very good. I like the production on here, although I like the early 80s productions of Jimmy Miller a little bit more. But all in all, I think this is strong Motörhead album. And 90s Motörhead, you don't sleep on 90s Motörhead. They made some great stuff in the 80s. Or I'm sorry, in the 90s rather. I'm with Gary. I give this an 8 as well.
Okay. 2 strong reviews. Let's move on to Andy. Andy, you're a Motörhead aficionado. So what do you think of this album?
I always remembered this album as being a really a standout from that period. And I think it's because, and after I revisited this album, I realized that it is sort of the beginning of the last chapter of this band. Yeah. When I started listening to Motörhead really in like 1999, and I just kind of went into their catalog in no particular order. And if you're looking at this catalog, starting there, looking back across the different lineups, the different producers, there's a lot of interesting variety across that stretch of time. But having been a fan since then and listening to this now, I realize that this is just kind of part of that homogenous last chapter of this band. I'm sorry, but the last 9 albums of Motörhead are really hard to tell apart from each other, regardless of how good they are. And that might be my problem. Maybe I just haven't spent enough time with those albums, but they coalesce around a lineup. They coalesce around a songwriting style, a recording style. They have the same producer on, 6 of the albums. I don't remember where one starts and the other ends or whatever. But this album is the last one where I can look down the song titles and go, oh yeah, that's a great song. I know how that goes. I can picture the chorus in my head. I think the songwriting is overall really quite strong on this. I do like the lighter things probably the best. I love Listen to Your Heart. I think, Lemmy is a guy that he's got a moral compass, and we know that because he's always like righteously raging against politicians and war and all this stuff and just the injustices of the world. But this is sort of like showing his moral compass in a through kind of a positive, encouraging, like good-hearted lens. And you know, the title track is just gorgeous. I think Don't Believe a Word is a really unusual, cool, heartfelt track. I love the call and response vocals that you mentioned, John. That is just like, it's just a nice little arrangement touch that they kind of they give that to you, not on the first chorus, but I think they bring it in on the second chorus. And I think that he's calling and responding with himself. I don't think Phil Campbell is much of a singer, but yeah, Lemmy's voice on this album is just the sweet spot. He's got so much gravitas and gravel, but he's still got all the girth. You really hear that on Eat the Gun, which is a little bit of a slight tune lyrically. This is something that he would do a lot going forward, where he would just kind of repeat a phrase over and over again in the verse. You know, eat the gun, eat the gun, eat the gun, eat the gun. Join the army, die in awful pain, die in awful pain, die in awful pain. It's got, you know, it was funny. I was just talking to Reed last night with Peter Kerr about the Stooges catalog, and they have a latter-day song called Gun that also could have been a cool social commentary, but it's just lyrically kind of lazy. This I kind of put in that category, but it's also just a lot of fun to listen to. I love the sound of his voice. The song just comes across like a hand grenade. Civil War is okay. You know, when we talk about Motörhead being a rock and roll band, I do take issue with that once Mickey D gets in the band. He's not a rock and roll drummer. He's a metal drummer. And I remember in an interview with Jeff Beck once, he said, if you've got a jazz drummer in your band, you're a jazz band. If you've got a rock drummer, you're a rock band. It's that simple. And when Mickey D, who is a guy who, you know, plays a lot of double kick, he's very efficient, he's very precise. When a guy like that gets in the band and the other guys go around him and it becomes tight, and there's a lot of palm muting in the guitars, and now we've got one guitar player, so he's doubling his own guitar tracks, which is very tight. It isn't the Wurzel thing where they're kind of a little swimmy, you know, the human imperfection of two guys playing in tandem. This is more like the way Metallica would record guitar tracks. It becomes very heavy metal, and I think Civil War and, you know, these things with the ferocious double kick drum. What I like about Motörhead is when they do songs that sound like rock and roll to me, and they don't just kind of throw in this perfunctory like boogie woogie piano thing to just kind of signify like we're a rock and roll band. So I think Crazy Like a Fox is kind of a good example of that side of them. What's the one that sounds like death metal and then it goes into like a blues shuffle? Is that Shake the World?
Yeah, probably Shake the World.
So that's like a good little slice of just unique genius right there. I mean, it starts out sounding, like I say, it's to me it sounds like death metal, the tremolo picking, and then it's like gong 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 gong. It's they might as well throw in a ba 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 ba. You know, it's just like a stripper pole music. So yeah, it's a cool. I think it's again just the songwriting quality. I think I don't know if they had an album after this that's got such a strong showing of songwriting. I think they dependably deliver the sound that you want going forward, and they kind of check the boxes. But you know, this just it's got a higher ratio of songs that I can remember. So I'm gonna give this what am I gonna give this? 7.5.
Okay.
Nice.
All right. 7.5. Still a positive review. Good stuff. Martin, you're our only man who has written a book about Motörhead. What do you think about this album?
Yeah, so the only times I don't trust in Motörhead's ability to write amazingly, perform amazingly, you know, get great production is essentially that period, a little bit in rock and roll, 1916 March or Die, definitely. Don't trust their instincts. Don't trust their instincts even on the debut all the way back. But every other time, absolutely. And yeah, it's interesting to try to figure out where this new version of the band starts. I mean, I always kind of looked at it as bastards, but moving forward, I totally agree with Andy. All of these songs, I mean, they're so aware of what they're doing, and I like the way you articulated that they have, you know, a songwriting style or method, but it's more like they have 6 or 7 boxes that they will tick off every once in a while. Not on every album, but the quality is so consistent throughout that you do become exasperated that you can't tell these albums apart. But going to this album in particular, I think it's a very heavy album, beautifully recorded. I love what you were saying about how this is a metal drummer and they become a metal band around it. But so yeah, just quickly going through them. Civil War, super heavy, but I love the chord changes and stuff in it. I mean, it's just got that lean and mean, dark sort of feel of the band. It's a metal track, but you're hearing you're just hearing a little bit of the spirit of Fast Eddie in that song, and even more so in the next one, Crazy Like a Fox. The funny thing about this one is, so this is this would be, I would say, the third most accessible rock and rollsy song on the album, but it's such an amusingly fast tempo that they do it at, and it's just like balls to the wall. It's just like barreling down the tracks kind of thing, and that's funny about it. I Don't Believe a Word is one of these variants on Orgasmatron that they do. You know, this is Lemmy singing over bass and drums and just in his total singing voice, but then you get the dark turn to the menacing chorus, and yes, it's almost like Lemmy in around dialogue with himself. Eat the Gun I don't like. It is only 2:13, but I don't like when they just go fast and punky and sort of D-beat. Overnight Sensation is the second most accessible song on here. I find it to be like butt shaking Ted Nugent, AC/DC beat Motörhead. Again, you get a little bit of Fast Eddie in it. I love the chorus on it. When they do these songs, often you get a little bit of heavy Rolling Stones out of them, and I think you kind of get that out of this chorus. Don't really think the little bit of acoustic guitar fits in this song. Love Can't Buy You Money. Now, I say this all the time about these later Motörhead albums. I get these massive arguments with people about how there is the classic period, and those are the unassailably great Motörhead albums, right? But then this is one of many examples across these albums. One I really like from the later years is Motorizer. It's got a bunch of songs I really like, but the verse riff in this song, like, I don't think Motörhead has a better riff. If that song would have been, this is how I always phrase it, if that song would have been parachuted onto Overkill, it just would have stood miles above every other song on that album. It's just so wickedly cool and creative. Yeah, and as Lemmy would always say, when you'd talk to him about these later albums, he'd say, "Oh, the old stuff sounds a bit ropey compared to what we're doing now." And ropey is the perfect way of putting it, because it was much more of a, it was still a very heavy band, but the amount of sort of creativity, inventiveness just wasn't there. So it was a rock and roll band with like some sort of sped up blues mind space around it, mixed with metal kind of thing. So you didn't get these really cool, complicated, interesting riffs like this. So yeah, that one's amazing. I don't like the way the vocal goes along with the riff in the chorus very much, but the verse riff is just one of the greatest that they ever did. Broken, I guess, is maybe the fourth most well, actually, maybe the third most accessible. That's got a little, almost like a bit of a hair metal feel in it. Them Not Me is just too loud and too heavy metal for me. It's just too wall of sound. Murder Show, I think, is one of my favorites on here. Again, that kind of marauding riff thing that they get from Fast Eddie, I think that you pick up from that. And I think Phil intentionally tries to live and breathe the spirit of Fast Eddie when he's doing his thing. I mean, there's a lot of Fast Eddie in what Phil does. Shake the World again, perfectly described, where it's got like the two sides of it and it breaks into that big blues thing. That, you know, that is something that Lemmy will want to remind you of every once in a while, that he's got that in him. And then Listen to Your Heart, I think doesn't fit. It's and even like putting it as the last track, it almost sounds like a bonus track. To me, it sounds like a Japanese bonus track or just something stuck on at the end. Had they buried it earlier, it would have just felt like a normal outlier. But now at the end, it really sounds like an outlier. And I don't really get the whole acoustic guitar thing in this song. It just really is the only song that arrangement wise is just so different from the rest of the album, that and it's just way too, almost too poppy, where you're starting to doubt, why did they do this thing? Is this really, like, are they trying to find a single sort of thing on it? So yeah, it is crazy. It's always frustrating talking about these albums. There's my fully signed version of it. It's scribbled all over kind of thing. It is really sort of frustrating all the time, given you know, this catalog in particular. But you know, we always talk about this with Saxon and Accept, and a lot of these bands where there's just such a flood of material, you know, 1 or 2 years apart, and the quality is so high that that you know, you're looking for things to complain about. And I think it's funny us trying to grade this album, because it's almost like we are penalizing them for being so good, where we have to look into the 7.5 and 8 zones, when really, you know, they're kind of all, you know, if it was just a standalone thing and you weren't realizing that they got so many similar albums, you know, we'd probably all be talking 8.5s and 9s on an album like this. So I'm going to go 8.5 on it, just to reward the band for just being so good at what they do and so aware of what is really good music. I mean, they could walk down the street or the you know, the ramp at the small venue or the big bar or whatever, and they could hold their head high that they know they're making Motörhead music that is equal to anything they ever did in the past. It just happens to not be the early days when you're breaking records with this kind of music, right? It's them in their later career where they've already done it all before. But I think this version of the band is just totally worthy. And all of these albums, there's just so much to get into on them. So sorry to be really long-winded about it, but yeah, it's very frustrating dealing with these albums. So.
All right, very cool. Okay, everyone's real positive so far. Well, I'm not going to break that trend. I freaking love this album. So let me start off by saying I had some fear before I bought this album. I often will argue that Sacrifice is my favorite Motörhead album. Not all the time, but often. It is a fantastic album. I particularly love the song Dog Face Boy, which is about Phil Campbell. And Wurzel was the straight up heavy metal guitarist. Phil describes himself as a fast rhythm and blues player. So when you get that rock and roll kind of guitar, you know that's coming straight from Phil. And all of the real thrashy, punky stuff, that was Wurzel. So I was like, okay, their heavier guitarist left. They're following up an album that I absolutely loved. And then you go to the store and you're like, what the hell is that? Now, they do have a Snaggletooth. They could have used that as the front cover. It would still be fairly lame, but it would have been much more in keeping. This is a terrible picture. These are not photogenic guys. And this was during a brief period of time when Lemmy didn't even have his mutton chops. He looks like, I don't know, Frankenstein's monster, even more than normal. It's a terrible picture. And I was like, okay, this is not looking good, but I've got to get it anyway. And I want to put it a little bit in historical context for our younger viewers. 1996 was not a time that was kind to traditional heavy metal. Now, grunge was no longer the ascendant popular music form, but it was still popular. What we then called alternative was really starting to take over the charts. Nu metal was starting to become the dominant form of heavy music. And the more extreme forms of metal, like death metal and melodic death metal and power metal in Europe, all started gaining popularity. But in Europe, in the United States, there was no audience for that kind of stuff other than, you know, the few hardcore faithful. So when this album came out, he was really releasing it into a void. There was not much of an audience in the United States for this type of music. So I love the fact that he didn't back down from that at all. He had already put out March or Die is Motörhead's attempt to do a hair metal album, for better or for worse. 4 of those songs he wrote with Ozzy Osbourne. I actually happen to really enjoy that album, but I know it's many people's least favorite Motörhead album. And instead, what they come out with is a killer heavy metal album that has a lot of colors on it. Sacrifice is a lot of things, but stylistically variable it is not. On this album, you get harmonica. You get Lemmy harmonizing with himself. You get acoustic guitar. And even if the acoustic guitar sounds out of place, that's a crayon that they didn't usually color with. So I think it's really interesting that the album was the same producer that they used on Sacrifice. And Lemmy always said bands need a producer because bands are terrible judges of their own material. They need an outside arbiter to tell them, this is good, this is not good, you need to rethink this. So I know he listened to production ideas while they were recording it. The opening song is just classic Motörhead, but I freaking love Crazy Like a Fox. They really established the template for this song back on 1916 with Going to Brazil. And this is the song, this is the riff that Phil Campbell owns. He's got this little Chuck Berry lick that he throws in all the time. I was going to bring it up later, but this is a good time for it. I don't think Phil Campbell is as strong a riff writer, at least not yet. He gets better later in the catalog, as Wurzel was. He tends to be much more about single note rhythmic variation rather than, when I think riff, I'm thinking Tony Iommi. You know, somebody who the song is the riff, right? Whereas that's not really the way Phil played. He was much more of a single note rhythmic variation guy, and then he would throw in these Jimi Hendrix-y kind of fills. No pun intended on the fill. And that was the guitar player that he was. And then he has very fast, which blues solos. He's not really like a typical heavy metal shredder. But all of that over the backdrop of Lemmy and Mickey D. And when people ask what kind of, you know, Lemmy is often described as a rhythm guitarist playing bass. And I always tell people, if you need anything to describe the way Lemmy plays bass, there's 2 songs on here that actually just open with bass. And doggone it, let's see here. What is the one I'm thinking of?
I Don't Believe a Word? Or Overnight?
Yes, I Don't Believe a Word does open up with naked bass. And he's clearly playing the rhythm guitar part. He even plays some chordal stuff, which, you know, you get that in jazz, but you really don't get that in rock and metal very often. So that is Lemmy in a nutshell. He's got a very distorted bass tone. He's playing through a Marshall head cranked up to the max. And the guitar really sits back on that song. And what I think provides the power of this album is that you have variation. You have a very straightforward song. Again, anytime there's a big change, bands want to come out of the gate and reassure you, right? The first song is just, hey, it's still the same band. You know, you liked the old stuff, you're gonna like the new stuff. And then they hit in with Crazy Like a Fox, some of Lemmy's best wordplay. There are just some great lines in that song. I know people talk about it being comedic, and it is kind of funny, but it's just good, solid rock lyrics. Even appropriate, you know, the term Crazy Like a Fox means you're acting nuts, but you're actually a genius. And he totally perverts that and makes it about sexual attraction. That's a very Lemmy thing to do. Don't Believe a Word has great lyrics. Lemmy, anybody who did as many albums as Lenny did is going to have their high and low points. Some of Lemmy's lyrics are just terrible, but I love his lyrics on this album. I think he really wrote some good stuff. And interestingly, I think that actually applies to Eat the Gun too. I think much more than a screed against guns, it's an anti-war song, and it really puts me in mind of Full Metal Jacket, which was about 10 years old actually when Overnight Sensation came out. But it gives me that same kind of feeling. Overnight Sensation, I think the bass is doubled with guitar at the beginning, but it can be very difficult to tell with Lemmy. And the chorus is very melodic. You get Lemmy harmonizing with himself. So there's another texture that you don't often get in a Motörhead album. Love Can't Buy You Money is great wordplay. Again, I mean, just that phrase is great wordplay, but the whole song's got great lyrics in it. Let's see here. Yeah, more Phil in Chuck Berry mode. I always say he's like Chuck on uppers and acid at the same time. When he does Broken, I love those songs. Them Not Me has all those weird rhythmic variations in it, and I always think, man, that would have been killer to try and pull off live, but I don't know if they ever played it live. I saw them live several times and I never heard them do that song. I think it would have been very difficult. As tight as they are on album, and I love Mickey D. He's absolutely in my upper echelon of drummers. Phil Campbell is not a tight guitarist live. He is very loose, probably because he is drunk off his ass when he's up there performing. But he does not hold a tight line while they are playing. Shake the World is good. I actually really like Listen to Your Heart. Motörhead had a tradition of ending their albums with something completely off the wall. You know, go back to 1916 and it ends with like a spoken word piece about how terrible World War I was. It's just that in this case, his off the wall track happens to be a straight up pop song from 1969. In fact, as Andy was saying, we were talking about the Stooges catalog. This song could have gone on the first Stooges album. It's in that 1969 rock and roll kind of mode, but it's brought up to modern production sound. And yeah, the acoustic guitar is a little out of place for Motörhead, but again, what the hell? It adds some color that you don't normally get. So I love this album from start to finish. Anybody who didn't rate this at 10 out of 10 is dead to me. You guys, you're all dead to me. I love this album. I do like some. Inferno's probably my favorite of the later catalog. Generally, every Motörhead album after this will have like 2 killer tracks, and the rest of them are just good. But this album, I love it from start to finish. And you know what? It makes me happy. I don't know how many Motörhead albums I put in and they instantly lift my mood. And I'm like, yeah, today's going to be a good day. I got up this morning and I put in Overnight Sensation. I was like, yeah, today's going to be a good day. So Lemmy, I'm sorry nobody bought this album. It's a great album. I give it a 10 out of 10.
I like this album cover. I think it's cool.
All right. Well, let's do some follow-up comments. Why do you like this piece of crap album? No, I'm sorry. It is well within your rights to like this album cover.
The thing is,
whatever reason you like.
They have 22 albums. All of them are Snaggletooth except for this and Ace of Spades, right?
Yeah.
You know, just a picture of the band. I think it's cool. And you know, it's also like when Thin Lizzy did Bad Reputation, they just had the 3 of them as the trio. You know, it's like, how else would we know that Wurzel's gone? You know, there's a picture of him. I think it's cool. And you were talking about the lyrics on Crazy Like a Fox. I have, I love your body 'cause it rocks, and you look just as beautiful when you move it in reverse. Those lyrics are awesome. Great lyrics on that song.
Yeah, I'll add that there is a quote from Mickey who says Wurzel is more Motörhead than all of us. Like he thought Wurzel was like a totally Motörhead guy, right?
Yeah.
And and on the album cover, I would say I like the idea. I agree with you that they're not the greatest pictures of the band because they both look photoshopped and fuzzy at the same time. They're just it's just a weird kind of picture. They really do make Phil and Mickey look younger than they are. And then Lemmy, yeah, looks a little bit strange without the mutton chops there. But yeah, and and I swear to God, I think people put down some of these albums because they're so similar. They put them down based on the title Overnight Sensation, or the title Kiss of Death, or the title Snakebite Love. Those three albums, got 15% taken right off the top because people didn't like the titles.
Right. I think We Are Motörhead is probably their latest or their laziest album title. And I love that album. Yeah. It's got two killer tracks on it. But I mean, come on, We Are Motörhead. They didn't spend much time thinking that one up.
I wish there was a consensus out there in the world of which of these albums from basically Bastards to the End are the best ones, because there definitely isn't. I think the only one, I think Bad Magic with Lemmy's voice being so deteriorated at that point, and maybe a little on Aftershock, maybe not. Bad Magic stands out a little bit. Bastard stands out a little bit as the first one kind of this era, but all the rest of I just wish there was a coalescing around some agreement, because I keep hearing a different one from everybody.
All right. John, you have any wrap-up thoughts?
I just think this album's very strong, and I think that a lot of people might have gave up on them in the 80s, but their 90s albums are just as strong. Maybe they don't have as many knockout tracks on them, but consistently, they're all very good. Except maybe March or Die, but even March or Die has a lot of good stuff on it too.
All right. I will go to the hill for March or Die. I enjoy that album.
I still think 1916 and March or Die are the only time they pandered to the industry.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I think with a couple songs on this record, they hit that commercial sound better than they did on March or Die. Like, the Too Good to Be True, and then on this album you have the Overnight Sensation and Listen to Your Heart, and what's the one on Rock and Roll too? All For You, that real commercial.
Yes.
Those are all great songs, but I think they really just had a bunch of great commercial songs on this record. Broken too, another great one.
I will say I like Lemmy's versions of his own tracks much better than I liked Ozzy's renditions of the same on Definitely. No More Tears.
Yeah.
All right, Andy, any last words or comments?
Yeah, just to follow up on what Martin's saying about how we're criticizing this lineup, because they were together for so long and they were going to sort of coalesce around something. And the classic lineup was going to do the same thing. By the time you get to Iron Fist, I mean, they're stretching it a little thin. I didn't expect, if that band would have stayed together for another 10, 15 years or 20 years, I mean, were we going to get that much variation going forward? I mean, I have a weird opinion about Motörhead. I kind of find the 82 to 92 period the most entertaining, because there's so much change in the lineups and the producers and just recording technology. And I find it all very, very entertaining. I love the subtle wrinkles in the style that are brought in by, Brian Roberts, and just a little bit of a different kind of approach on the guitar, or the two guitar lineup, or the Bill Laswell sound. I love 1916. I think 1916 has everything that's great about Motörhead on that record, and it pushes the envelope. I love the title track. It gives you the straight up rock and roll songs, but it gives you these barn burners like I'm So Bad, Baby, I Don't Care. So I do have a weird kind of opinion. I don't hold up that classic lineup as being absolutely sacrosanct. I think they had so much more still to offer. My main complaint about this lineup is it does get to be a bit of a sausage factory where they're just kind of cranking it out, and they do get a little too proficient for me on these albums. I loved that loose and sloppy punk thing that they had early on, just down to the kind of the I don't want to call it the naivety of the musicianship, but it's like nobody is really is really virtuoso, and there's all the drug and drink mixed in, and it's just like this crazy amphetamine rush. And it does get a little professional with this lineup, where they know what they're doing, they get along great, they know how to crank out an album and get a good proper, you know, hi-fi representation of it in the studio. And it kind of lacks some of the danger. It kind of feels a little bit like they're putting on an old coat every time they make a new album. But it's not really much to complain about, honestly. I think Lemmy is such a unique, I mean, absolute one-off of an artist that it really doesn't matter. I mean, you're just grateful for whatever he was able to put out into the world. The wordplay, I mean, the song title "Love Can't Buy You Money" is reason enough to buy this album.
Right.
The song title, like, I don't even know what the song's about. It's just stuff like that. It's just that humor laced with intelligence, mixed with a moral compass, mixed with I'm also a badass and I live life on my own terms. And you always get that on their records. So it's always a net positive. And then we just quibble about like the little details around the sides, you know.
Yeah.
Also,
All right.
only 3 songs on this album were played live: Overnight Sensation, Civil War, and Broken. And from what I saw, Broken was only played on the one tour, but they brought the other 2 back from time to time. Kind of a shame. But what can you do? They have a bunch of great albums.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that Lemmy plays harmonica. I mean, how many other heavy metal harmonica players are there? I can't really think of any. So, Martin, any wrap-up comments?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered it well. We're good.
All right, then. Overnight Sensation may not have been one, but it's been high in my affection since 1996. It makes me happy. I'm glad everybody liked the album, even though you're all still dead to me. I'm sure we'll be doing more videos in the future. So please leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about Overnight Sensation, what your favorite Motörhead album is, what you think of the departure of Wurzel from the 2-guitar lineup, why Phil Campbell is better than Fast Eddie Clarke. I know that's a contrarian opinion, but I do. I like Phil better than Fast Eddie Clarke. For that matter, I like Phil Campbell's Bastard Sons. I think they're not Motörhead, but they put out decent albums. And you can join our Patreon, get you on these panels, look into, you know, other situations. We've got merch and Ko-fi, and I don't even know what all, but we appreciate the hell out of you for spending time watching our videos, and we hope to see you real soon. So, guys, thank you. I've been looking forward to this panel. We'll catch you soon on another
All right.
video.
Thanks, guys. See you
Thank you.
later.
Cheers, guys.
Bye now. Yeah.
Thanks.